Yes, g'day. Welcome to BackChat. We've got something a little bit different here. Now, when I say different, I don't mean in a bad way. It's certainly a good way. We've interviewed athletes. We've interviewed people from the media. We've never had someone on in the talent and sports managing space, so we are very lucky enough.
I'm maybe more excited for this than most.
I think it's an area of intrigue to the footy public, so we're very lucky to have Western Australia's and Australia's leading talent and sports agent, Colin Young.
Going a bit too far there, Scully. But,
how are you, Cole?
I'm very well, and I am probably a little bit different.
Look, mate, I'm a bit like Dan. I've been intrigued in this area for a long time. Clearly, I've dealt with it as a player, and I think we're going to open the can a little bit and get into a few things.
You looked like going into it one stage, didn't you?
I did.
We had a chat.
We met down at the Seafood Place Catalano's.
Yeah.
Because you said it's a good place to meet because no one has coffee here, so we're the only people in the restaurant. Felt like some sort of backroom deal. No one was in the restaurant. I was with Cole. But Cole, before we get into it,
that's the norm.
I do want to thank all of our sponsors: Margaret River Roasting Co., Whippersnapper Whiskey, Bluebet, Shelter Brewing Co., Leadable Cameras for having you on the show and making all of this happen. And the first question we ask all of our guests, Cole, I don't know how much of a BackChat fan you are, but we ask the same question to every single guest.
Okay.
Right. So it has to do, and I'm wondering how I'm going to frame this. Okay. So we ask our sporting stars on here, we want to know their greatest sporting achievement,
right? Not
in their selected area of sport.
That's right.
I mean, Dan's taken 5 for 16 in a cricket match in under 12s.
Grand final.
I was an under 9s 80 metre state champion in the hurdles. So
you could basically pick anything.
I want to know your greatest sporting achievement, full stop.
At any age?
Any age, preferably at a young age.
I think I kicked 13 goals for the Bentley Tigers. And and the worst achievement was getting the flick from St Kilda Colts or reserves.
Really? So were you a full forward? Or were you
I did play a bit centre half forward, but when I was growing up, I was probably half the size, so I was a little forward pocket. Dynamo, Hayden Ballantyne, pain in the arse.
Really?
Yeah.
And now you're just a grown up pain in the arse?
Yeah. Full grown pain in the arse.
Well, I was going to ask, what's your history in sport growing up?
Typical Melbourne junkie football, live, breathe, shout out the whole thing in Melbourne. The age of probably 13, 14, I'll be running around Caulfield Racetrack on Sundays, and great players like Tuddenham and Thomason and Skilts were running around there, and I was about 9, just sitting behind, listening to their talk about what they do, and running around the 10 times, and probably just footy all the way along. I just wanted to be a footballer. I remember at school, the geography teacher we sat there, and what does everyone want to be? We're going through the whole lot, and I want to play in the VFL. Well, that's not going to make much money.
Really?
So I did okay the first contract at the Saints, but and then basically got transferred over here. I think Jesselinko told me I was probably 21 going on 12, so he told me to beat it and go to another state, and so I came over to play footy with East Perth, and that probably lasted about 4 months after finding out what Sunday sessions are.
So you play at a state level for footy. Is there a time where you're obviously in player management now? How long have you been a player agent?
Nearly 20 years.
So what's the pathway from trying to make it as an AFL player, VFL player, to moving towards player management?
Probably let my ambition get mixed up with my ability back then. About how good I thought I was. And Brian Cook was the reserve coach at East Perth at that time.
Was he?
Yeah, and Greg Breer was the senior coach at East Perth, and probably just didn't take it professionally enough as what I should have. And coming from Melbourne, and I know we always talk about the funny thing, kicking those oranges around the Billy Seacombe's. I was just making excuses everywhere, and then basically from footy I just had a break because I'd been all my life just football, watched every game, and went and watched St Kilda train. I just down the road, and then basically when I stopped footy, I went into the health clubs. Back into martial arts, and then after a hiatus, thought I want to get back into sport again, so applied for a job with the WACA, sponsorship, marketing, got to know, I met Warnie back in the day, and then Damien Martin, JL, BJ, started working with the cricketers. Fortunately back then we had 3 or 4 West Coast games played, so I could watch the West Coast, and then Fremantle came on board, and then basically Cookie, to his credit, I stole all their clients from CB Oval because Jeffy wasn't working that hard back then. So we filled up the Wacker ground, built some more boxes, sponsorship went through the roof. I really enjoyed what I did because I loved it. Cookie put me in for a job at the AFL just to get rid of me. And to his credit, I got the job and then just about to move back to Melbourne, and Cookie rang me up and said, have you taken the job? I said, yeah. He goes, I want you to come over and work for West Coast. And worked for West Coast for 6 years, had great CEOs in Cookie and Nizzy. Went down to Fremantle, worked there for 3.5 years. I had a couple of good CEOs down there as well. And then during that time, you could sort of meet with, sportsmen, Damien Martin. I looked after him for a bit. And cricketers, whether it be JL or BJ Gilly, it's asking what their managers do and what they don't do. And then you get to West Coast and speak to what their managers do and what they don't do and what they should do. And you sort of forget that Richard Branson type process where you're trying to work out, well, this could be something I could look at down the track. Just keep on building what your own thought process would be as a player agent. And then at Fremantle, I think I was talking to Aaron Sandilands and Paul Medhurst and J-Lo and Troy Longmuir and a cast of others about their managers, and I thought there could be an opportunity to sneak in here because I didn't think at that stage the managers were doing great jobs over here. There were accountants and lawyers, not part-timers. I'm not big on anyone doing anything part-time. You're in or you're out. So I sort of ripped the Band-Aid off and said I'm out, and started player management with Paul at Corporate Sports, and we've just gone, pretty well ever since.
So you've come from a marketing and sales background, but then being around those elite organisations and your own experience as a player, albeit not at the highest level, but you've been through the ups and downs of selection, that sort of stuff. Would it be fair to say that it was fairly unregulated when you first started managing players, like the actual industry? There
was more bullishness to the industry because the Ricky Nixons, the Paul Connors, and they were pretty well settled and entrenched. So it's hard to get in to try and break it. And players sometimes are very loyal to their agents. But at that stage, because there was more part-timers in WA, there was an opportunity here to get involved. And at that stage, I was marketing and sales pre-orientated. Of course, having known all the sponsors from Freo, West Coast to Wacker, that side of it was taking care of it. So the opportunity to get players more involved in sponsorship was good. And then working with Cameron Schwab during trade period and learning how he went about it, where he went to get trades done and how he pushed the buttons, and speaking to footy managers at the time about their contracts and how they did them without them knowing what I was thinking at all times. So when I became an agent, I knew most of their tricks. So, because it is fairly hard to start from day one and go, I'm going to do Will Schofield's contract, it's the first one, what do I do? What's his value? What's going on? What clauses? So you really needed to know on the other side what the clubs get up to.
Which side's the dark side then? Is the club land?
Well, they say the agents are the dark side. Probably was back in the start, but the club pretty well got me covered now. Fucking hell.
So who was your first player then that you signed that you were managing?
I haven't even asked that question. I'm pretty sure it might be Aaron Sandilands, maybe.
It's a big one to start with.
Yeah,
literally,
yeah. He was like a baby giraffe, and Schwabby actually got me onto it. He said, I was watching Aaron train, and Colin Young, and I'm going, geez, he's a bit gangly, and yes, all ruckmen are like that, but trust me, this guy is going to be a star. And I went, okay. So from there, he went from probably Aaron, Paul Medhurst, who superstar, J-Lo, Troy Longmuir, Roger Hayden, Michael Johnson, Dion Woods.
So there's a lot of Freo guys.
Yeah, then West Coast Curry, and then from Curry, Chad Fletcher, Tyson Stengline, Quinny Lynch, and just all great blokes. Just very fortunate. I was in the right time at the right place.
Can I strip it back and again, like I said off the top, I think there's a lot of intrigue into the industry, and starting with what would you say player managers do, player agents? What do you do? What's the primary role?
Every management company would do something different, and that's the probably difference of when you're going to pitch a player to come on board. This is our difference to their difference to. What other companies do in Melbourne, and so at the time when we started, I thought, well, obviously sponsorship was a massive key. So I remember doing Curry's first sponsorship deal. We got a pool and a spa bath from Freedom Pools from Bobby Burnett.
That sounds good.
I know, straight off the cuff. So you guys heard about it, so that was pretty good for me. I made sure that everyone knew about that one. Back those days, the car deals were a lot more easier to get. So Stengline came over from Adelaide, and there was a Monaro at the airport, I think, from memory. I can't remember that one. So it was sort of that, but making sure they had the right tax advice. I had people in banks, I had people in real estate, and So it was just a bit of everything back in the day. The AFL become more focused on player agents and what they do now on and off the field, and there's more regulations around that. There probably wasn't a lot when I first started, but if you did step out of line, you did get clipped. I got called to. I think Brendan Gale and Robbie Kerr were running the AFLPA back then, and they got me to fly over because I was taking a few parents to the footy and having a burger and a beer with them. So
that's
I think
sort of like grooming.
Well, just getting to know each other, really.
Yeah, but is that what the issue was?
Yeah. But then I remember speaking to Gailey at the time. I said, mate, that I think you got managed by Ricky Nixon. I think this story is true and correct. From memory, he goes, and he looked at Curry and he goes, yeah, I did. Why? I said, he's got a corporate suite. And he goes, oh, has he? Oh, game over. See you later. So back on the plane and home again.
What's that? Because there are pretty strict regulations around that.
Yeah, well, a couple of times there's a few companies sending out signed ponting bats and some boots and runners and bits and pieces. And
signed ponting
the V100.
Yeah. Well, mate, no one did it better than Paul Connors, Bobby Sugars. He was the best. He'd take Nick Nat to dinner with a few young kids and bang, off they go. Yes. And Paul does it really well. So there was a lot. We all do things a bit different, but mainly the aim is to the end of the 10 to 12 years to stay in the game as long as possible. Make sure you try and earn as much possible for your position you played. Is to own your own properties, maybe have an investment property, own your cars, and either choose a job that you want to do, that you want to love for the rest of your life, or don't work at all. I don't think Reece Palmer's worked a day in his life. I think every time I see him on Instagram, not that I'm on it much, he's always overseas doing something. So that's the greatest contracts of all time, was Reece's ones. Anyway.
Well, I would say more broadly, you've got your reputation as a manager is you get the very best for your players, and you're an elite contract negotiator. Would you agree with that reputation?
I think the experience gone through, over that journey, and then having battles, if you can call it a battle, against the best, and learning and growing, and you analyse every contract. Even 12 months later, you look at what you did at that last contract, and even 3 years ago when you did, say, Paul Medhurst's contract, you look at what the negotiation was then and how he did it and what the loophole, then you go back and peel it forward again. But the contracts, having done it for so long and knowing the marketplace and what a true ruckman's worth, to move club, to stay at the club, what's the price to do that. So the contracts can be a little bit difficult at times depending on who you're dealing with on the other side of the table. But normally 9 times out of the 10, they know what you're doing and we know what you're doing, so let's get common ground and get it done what the player wants. So but that's the game, and I know sometimes you get a lot of people unhappy the way you go about it, but normally we try and keep things under the table, not let the media know what we're doing or anyone what we're doing. So we want to get through the contract process quietly and get it achieved and not go through the media as some people think we do, but I certainly don't. So it's more so the clubs where you spruik that.
With being a known good contract negotiator, does that ever hurt you? Like, I know, so in the NBA, there's a guy, Danny Ainge, who's the current one of the GMs at Utah Jazz, and clubs don't like dealing with him because they always know they're going to get fleeced by him. Like, they want to do trades, but they're like, all right, we know he's got something here. Like,
you certainly don't go into a negotiation to fleece anyone, because in 12 months' time, you could be doing another contract for a player who might be just entering the system in 2 years. You do look for a really amicable result, and you're obviously trying to get the best result for your player, but you do try and work with the clubs on their salary cap, what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve over a 5-year period, whether it's to win a premiership. This is what they're doing, they're building at. So, but yeah, there's no doubt that some clubs will go, fuck, Cole, blah, 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 contracts.
How's he going to stitch us over?
I don't try and stitch us up. He goes, but remember, my backhand might be better than your forehand. It's the same thing with trade period. Like, you try and work together, with clubs during trade period, because you never know what's going to happen in 12 months' time. You might be working for a club this time, get a player back this way. So you always try and keep it honest and professional as much as you can along the journey, and achieving a result for, with Will and his family going forward, because it's not about the now, it's about when they're retiring, to make sure they're set up financially. And clubs are brutal as, you've just seen recently Zach Lander get cut with 1 year to go. Zach got an offer at the GWS to stay for 2 or 3 years and chose to come home from an offer, to West Coast, and it's a business thing that they've made a decision to move him on. So it's always not just me. It's sometimes the clubs are making tough decisions, but certainly, you do try and go in and get the best result for your players. But you know, over the journey, the averages aren't true anyway, but what your players are worth, whether it be rover, halfback flanker. You know, many years ago, halfback flankers weren't getting paid much. Then JJ wins the Norm Smith, and now they're $500,000 a year.
About time Backman started getting paid some money.
Yeah, you do all the work. I speak to Jeremy this morning. Backman always do all the work, mate. So you're playing back and forward.
Thank you. Cole understands. Thank God.
Griffin Lowe doesn't agree with that, though.
Yeah, that's true. So how does a contract negotiation work for people listening along that love AFL and they love their players, and there is always a bit of a veil, like you said. Some things do get into the media, but I would say the process of a contract negotiation between a player manager and a club, people don't know how it works. What do? Do you call them up? Do you email them? Do you go in person?
Yeah, well, it's basically all about timing.
How long does it last?
Yeah, well, you try and look. If Will Schofield's flying off the half-bank flank and he's in the top 3 in the best and fairest, and he's got 1 year to go.
Might be time.
Hey,
for
mate,
chat.
it might be time for a chat. Certainly, from our point of view, look, you want to sign him now because if he gets to the end of the year, he's got 1 year to go, and I heard Hawthorn are after him. So it's all about timing. But this time of the year, being November, December, you're meeting with the players to talk about what happened last year. Generally, most of them on holidays right now, but when they get back, you're out of contract next year. You've got 2 to go. We talk about the finances and the family and all that first, and then look, you've got 1 year to go. You're happy with the club. You're staying. We're all good. Move on. Sometimes you get a player this time of the year. Look, I played 7 games last year. I'm just letting you know, if I don't play more than 7 next year, I'm out. So straight away you're into trade mode. Okay, write it down. This bloke, bang, bang, bang. What clubs? I already know what clubs would take him straight away because I know what positions clubs are chasing through the trade period. But at any stage, you can start negotiating contracts. It doesn't have to be at the end. It can be halfway through your first year. If the guy's jumped up from there to there and there's goodwill, you can say, well, hey, mate, we signed him on that. He's jumped really quickly, and it's in your best interest to sign him out long term. And then you do it. So it's always trying to pick the moments. But there's never any given time.
Would you say when a player is coming out of contract and you start seeing in the media the players, I'm going to play through this year and we're going to make some decisions at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Would you say that majority of the time that means that player potentially is looking elsewhere?
There's a fair chance, but I have had players that seriously were waiting, but they weren't looking anywhere. And it wasn't until the end of the year they made their decision whether to stay or go.
It's an individual thing.
Yeah, you sort of get to, sometimes I've guessed, they're definitely going in my own mind, and then, no, I'm staying. Well, okay, sure, no worries, we've got that in play. But you see in the paper these days, or the media go, oh, look, if he hasn't made a decision by now, he's definitely going. Well, we had that with Griffin Lowe during this year, and he definitely wasn't going till late, really late. He wanted to stay. Jerry McGovern, when he was a free agent, I think we talk about times and moments about when we did contract negotiations, and I think Nick Nat went down with a serious injury.
Yep. And
of course Jeremy was out of contract, so I thought, not being, Nick's down, we'd been talking about Jeremy to do something. Look, Nick might now reconstruct his contract, push more out the back. Might be time to speak to the club about Jeremy. I think we did Jeremy in about 2 weeks that time. So, and he's a free agent this year too, I think.
So sometimes when you hear, just he's working. He's working here.
He's already working.
Sky knows like.
I'll send it to this.
So when you do hear, weighing up options, that's not always a case. Like some players legitimately are weighing up because that seems like I don't want to make any commitments now because it sounds like they're out, but some players genuinely are just seriously waiting.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah,
I would be, if I was a punter or member, I'll be thinking the same thing. Surely by now, but you've got to weigh up. It could be family, could be a girlfriend. It could be don't want to leave Perth because it's a fantastic place to live.
Could be money.
It could be money. Yeah, sometimes. The difference is staggering. In a contract, sometimes it can be double. So someone's on 300 or 400 and they go to 8 over 5 years, it sets them up for life. So, but you also got to make sure the club's the right club, that the coach is the right coach. You've got to make sure the DNA of your own player is going to fit the DNA of the club he's going to. Otherwise, as it will probably last about 6 months and go, what the F have I done?
Yeah.
I've got to get out of here.
Yeah.
What's your relationship like with journalists and media people?
I reckon journalists would probably dislike me, most of them, because I know there's a perceivance that I do speak to some media and I don't. I generally don't. Sometimes, I've got friends like Adrian Barrich, but he knows where to draw the line and I know where to draw the line. But the journalists are like detectives and they're probably a necessary evil to the industry, like managers used to be. But there is like Cal Toomey, Damien Barrett, and a couple over in Perth. They're like detectives. They'll just ring and ring and ring, and they'll go to a CEO and they'll go to an ex-player and they'll just call, and all of a sudden they'll get a result. And it's true. And sometimes you think, they go, how did they find that out? Especially this year, during trade period this year, we kept on seeing, Andrew and I kept on seeing articles in the Western Australian, which...
This is Andrew McDougall.
Andrew McDougall works with us, yeah. And the article was like 99% correct on what players were earning. So it had to come from Clubland, in our opinion, because we weren't talking, and players find out if we're talking about the contracts to the media, we'll see you later, Col. Yeah. So, we don't do that. But I generally have. I remember going into the business a long time ago, and you know what clubs like, anti-media, don't tell them nothing, the walls were up, especially West Coast at that time, and they did a really good job at it. Well, I'm going to change it. I'm going to speak to the media and I'm going to try and work with them as much as I can, but also keep my clients' information private and confidential. And then an issue happened overseas, and I remember a bloke calling me who I had trust in from the Sunday Times, and the only time I've done an off-the-record chat, but don't do it because there's some health issues and all that. No, you got my word. And the next day, back page was the article. And I rang him and he said, mate, I had to run it. So from that time on, I've never done off-the-record, ever off-the-record with media. I got asked that question during trade period, do you use the media? If at times you need to defend your own player, then you've got to use the media. And now with social media and all these different platforms, there's so many rumours getting out about this trade's getting done for that reason, and this guy's getting, the manager's moving a player because it's more money for him, which is bullshit, and blah, blah, blah. And so you sometimes got to set the record straight. And, this morning I saw some questions that were sent through to you.
Some good ones, Cole.
Outstanding questions, and I get it. And I heard those rumours through trade period from family members who believe the media instead of their person, their own family member. Even I think with 10 minutes ago, I think my wife said to my oldest, he's not getting done. I knew it was never going to get done. It's not getting done. All this time, 12 months, not getting done.
This is your wife.
Yeah. Lucky that Logan didn't tell me till about a week later. Otherwise, I would have been probably a little bit. Got home, I was fully exhausted anyway. But look, there is some really good media. Like there's some really good managers, and there's some really bad media, and there's some really ordinary managers out there. So it's
You touched on. Media finding out how much players are getting paid. I know in American sports it's pretty much completely transparent. You know what player contracts are, and there is a bit of talk around that whether the AFL should move to that. What's your take on players?
100% against it.
Yeah,
because just because of the pressure of the players. Like, you can see what happens if a player's got 800 by 5 and he's gone to so and so. Well, the media not worth it. Should be getting, should take a pay cut. The club made a mistake. The industry at the moment is not mature enough to do it. And the pressure that is put on the players and the family, I know it's a professional business we work in, but I just don't think the industry is ready for that yet. In 10 years' time, it might be different if they're earning $1 million, the average wage is $1 million. But I went to the NFL Combine and I've met with 19 NFL clubs, chief financial officers, recruiters, trade people, and that question, because it's the norm over there and the members don't care about what some players are earning, because it's what's the difference between 200 million and 180 million, really who cares? Yeah. But over here, if someone's earning $1 million and someone's earning $150,000, there's a bit of a difference, and $150,000 a better player at them. There's just too much bullying within the industry when people start finding out what they think they're getting. And the clubs, the media sometimes get it right and sometimes they get it wrong. And when they get it wrong, it's normally big time wrong. And the player normally pays a penalty for that. You're on too much money, getting paid overs, you're not good enough, you're just a backman.
Right, heard that before. It sounds like the industry is a relationship industry. Like, yes, there's sales, yes, there's sponsorship, but you're effectively managing relationships between player and club and agent and the media, and not that you're a middleman, but you're a manager, right? You're a relationship manager, is it?
Relationships is the key.
Yeah.
To being successful in this industry is having strong, honest relationships. And, I've had some absolute doozy meetings, with, a couple of the high-profile CEOs, which scared the shit out of me at the time, and probably still does. But it's about relationship and doing trades. Like sometimes even now with trade, you've got to pick the club. We talked about DNA. Will the club get it done? How they go about it. Look, if you're saying, hypothetical Brad Hill, St Kilda, how are we going to get it done? What picks are you going to use? Because you don't want to go into a trade that's not going to get done.
Yeah.
You've got to make sure the other club the player's going to is going to reward the club that's losing the player. So it's relationships. And after you've had relationships, and most of the guys who I worked with maybe 20 years ago who are list managers, some of them are CEOs.
Yes.
Some of them head of footy. Some of them work at the AFL. So when you have these 20-year relationship and you get experience with how these people work and they know operate, and sometimes, Cole, you could have used a feather and used a frigging cannon. I get that. So since COVID, I've been very nice. I just use a feather all the time. That's it. Get the same result. That's a true story. And so that is the key. It's just relationships, and sometimes, they'll be a little bit burnt at times, but the good ones is that you can put the gloves on. I've said it many times, and then an hour later after trade, you can go and have a beer. It didn't work out that way, but next year, as I said to you, I've taken about 15 players to Fremantle over the journey. I think I maybe had 3 trade out, but people only forget the 3 that's gone out. Not the ones that I bought in. But the relationship, like with David Walls, I'm going to Melbourne in 10 days, and I'm going to visit probably 17 clubs to talk about the draft, but more so our list of players out next year. We have 20 players out of contract.
Right. There's
a fair chance that 2, possibly 3 will want to get traded. So we're already into that position, but you go to the clubs you trust that are going to keep their mouths quiet. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. You have strong relationships and trust.
So talking about your list of players, one, how many do you have at any given one time? And it's fair to say that you're West Australian skewed. I mean, you're based in Perth, you're based in West Australia, you've got a lot of West Coast guys, a lot of Freo guys, you've got West Australians that are interstate. How does it go managing that full list of players, and then is there conflicts of interest that if you've got 10 blokes on one list, or if you've got 2 blokes wanting to go from one to the other, if you've got a higher paid player and a lower paid player, how do you manage that full list?
Yeah, when I first started, there was, obviously the social media wasn't up and about, and the industry was a bit slower than it is now. So I would be repping about 50 players probably 15 years ago to myself. And Andrew's come on board with me. We should probably do 25 players each at the moment. We probably stick to that. Back in the day, I used to have a look at Melbourne players as well, because if they were coming, I used to get if West Coast or Fremantle were talking, mainly more so West Coast back then, we're talking to players, Matty Spanger, Ben McKinlay or Robbie Warnock. So I was in the market then, and I found the market quite easy in Melbourne compared to WA to get involved in. And then the talent was coming through so strong with WA, I didn't feel the need to encroach over to Melbourne. And, they've got some very good managers in Paul Connors and Marty Pask and, some good agencies over there. And so they're entrenched into Melbourne, and some were entrenched here, but they've moved on to Melbourne. But we made a point, that we, if we're taking a player, Schofield, going to Gold Coast, we're going to be there every 4 weeks. We're very accountable. So at the end of the year, everything we do every month, every 6 months, 12 months, we're accountable. Everything we wanted to achieve is accountable in the following year. So we move around a fair bit. There's no conflict whether you've got one player. At one stage, we had 16 players at Fremantle. We've probably got about 9 now. One stage, we had 14 at West Coast. Probably got about 8 or 9 now. 2 years' time, we might have 14 at West Coast and back again. It's like a cycle. Once we had about 8 or 10 players at Gold Coast, we've got 2 now. So it just moves around all the time. But there's no conflict whether you've got, a type A player or a C guy coming in with contracts, or very rare that you've got 2 players, they're playing in the midfield chasing the same dollar. And normally, the midfielders, as you probably know, probably get paid between 600 and 800, the good ones. So generally, unless they win a Brownlow, and it probably goes into the $1 million category. So there's usually enough money, and midfielders get paid it all the time, as we all know, they get all the money.
Correct.
So there's no issues.
You got bloody something to answer for that, Cole.
Yeah.
Seriously, let's not give us some money to the backman, which you do, I know. You looked after Gov.
What about, I'll just throw like a
Brad Shepard.
Yes.
Like a hypothetical at you. I don't know. So for instance, like with Griff going to North Melbourne this off-season, and another player who was leaving North Melbourne, Jason Horne-Francis, to Port. If you were managing both of those guys and they were involved in the same deal, how do you make sure that both players are being looked after while, you really want to get Griff to North because that's where he wants to go, but you also need to look after the guy who's leaving?
Yeah, well, you've started 12 months out. With Griff, we didn't start 12 months because we actually thought we'd be recontracted by March, and he wasn't. So different, and Horn Francis came to the end. I believe it wasn't till, maybe a month out that he decided that he might want to, make a move. But they're different time frames, and it's not as if you spend 24 hours on one, and you know that Griffin Logue's a free agent. I mean, not a free agent, he's out of contract, and North Melbourne on the bottom of the ladder. So unfortunately, Fremantle had no cards to play. So that was a done deal no matter what. Although we did have a good relationship with Brady, and we did look after Fremantle to make sure they got what they wanted to. But at the end of the day, and Fremantle knew it, they had to take these two good picks, but we knew that was getting done. We did hear, I'm not obviously his agent, but I did hear rumours and, innuendo during that Horn Francis did get a bit homesick and wanted to go home. So if that was true, then you're putting it in the play straight away. Mm-hmm. And if the different players during that 12-month period, there's going to be different movement along the journey. Horn Francis 2 clubs, then it was 1 club, just Port Adelaide. Griffin Logue spoke to about 9 clubs towards the end because we didn't realise what was going to happen. So I want to make sure that the right coach, the right club, the right DNA, and it all fitted pretty well. It's not, we had 5 trades this year, Andrew and I, and we got 5 done, so it wasn't really hard. Last year Bobby and Roy didn't get done. They both got done this year, but we had 12 months to plan it. And the longer you have, the easier it is to do trade.
Cole, I'll just take a little break from going into the industry and talk about your and I relationship. I almost signed with you at one stage, but it goes back further than that.
Yeah.
You know my wife's in-laws very well, Patrick and Kim.
Yeah, well,
so what I just sort of found out pre this podcast of some messaging you maybe gave to Alex's father, Patrick.
It's good.
Do you want to just let our listeners know what you told him?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that, but players sometimes don't listen, and sometimes parents don't let them listen either. But basically, Patrick was he was diehard West Coast, and I know he used to sit behind the dugouts and he used to listen to players and when they came off and how they interacted with each other, and swearing and good people, bad people, and Pat had a great relationship with Maney and a lot of the players because they all surfed and they loved the West suit gear and all that, and the West suits and all that. So I was down there once a month to have a chat to him if anything I could help him out with, because if the players were happy, that I'd be happy as when I worked at West Coast or as an agent. And then we're talking about his, gorgeous daughter, Alex, and who's a model at that time. And I said, we're talking about players, and whatever you do, mate, Pat, do not let her go out with any AFL players. do not do it. Trust me. I've got fucking 50 18-year-olds, mate, and do not do it. And anyway, about 6 months later, I called up and he goes, "Oh, fuck."
He was pretty shattered, wasn't he, when he saw him?
Yeah.
Cole.
God, mate. God, I can't believe this, mate. Alex has seen a footballer, and I went, "Oh shit, really?" And normally you sort of hear, you get the grapevine in the lockers, or seeing so and so, or Duke was seeing some model at some stage, or where it might be, and Pat goes, "Oh, it's Will Schofield," and I go, "Oh, okay, well." I haven't heard anything bad about Will Schofield, which is absolutely rare, because you always hear something's going on with some players' life.
That's almost sus then.
Hey?
That's almost sus. If you haven't heard anything bad.
It's almost like I'm a good bloke, Dan. I don't know.
It was all lies and innuendo what the papers wrote about him, see? He's a good bloke. And it worked out really well. So, family and that. But I had to laugh because the one thing I was saying at that stage, don't do it.
Don't date footballers.
And she didn't for a while, apparently. So
yeah, she told me the first time I met Alex, she said I don't date footballers. So she did listen to you, Cole.
Oh, good.
I just.
Well, she made the right move by not listening to me.
I am persistent. So I thought I'd just take a little trip down memory lane there. Back to sort of players you manage and big moments. 2014, Matty Priddis wins a Brownlow. What's that moment like?
That was probably one of the best moments as an agent you could ever have, because he's missed 3 or 4 drafts from memory. I remember the family telling me to give it up, and I just loved him, as we all love Matty Priddis, and why wouldn't you? John Citizen, and if you had a daughter, you would actually let him marry.
Absolutely, it'd be one up there.
He was, and we just, and every year I just watch him and I go, what is it, And I remember ringing James Fantasia from the Crows, and I said, mate, can you do us a favour? I want John Griffin, and I need John Griffin and Pritter. Can you give him some train on and see how we go with them? So both the boys flew over. Back then it was a lot easier to get players to train on. Anyway, Neil Cray was the coach then, and he was a hard man, Neil, from outside looking in. Anyway, I watched them train for a week, and I went up to Craigie at the end of it, and I said, "How you going?" Didn't really want to talk to managers anyway back then, and so John Griffin, not bad, yeah, I think there might be something there, and he got rookie to Adelaide. what about Matty Prittis? Oh, I don't think Matty's going to play footy, mate, in the AFL. Shit, okay, all right, no worries. And anyway, I think at the end, cutting a long story short, I think Woody picked out that he was probably a little bit solid too big with a life-saving, let's cut his weight back, and he started to move a lot quicker, across the ground. And then during the year, I don't know if anyone or Matty's told you this, you sort of, as an agent, when you've got a player that's possibly going to win the Brownlow, you get these forms from the AFL merchandise saying your players the chance to win the Brownlow.
Really?
I went, shit, okay, well, he's had a good year. Anyway, so I rang the other managers to find out who else had the forms. Anyway, they've told me who they've got, and I've gone, fuck, I think Matty's had a better year than all these guys. So anyway, so I rang Matty up, and we've gone to a coffee shop in Subi. I said, Matty, I've got a funny feeling you're going to win the Brownlow. And he goes, what the fuck are you talking about, Cole? He's like, don't you be talking like, he's like,
yeah,
he's just
the most modest man in the history of the world.
Yeah, and he goes, that's fucking not up. That's not. I go, well, mate, I'm telling you, I've done it. I reckon you're going to win it. So the story is funny is because obviously on the night before I was walking up the red carpet, and Damien Barrett goes, oh, what are you doing, Cole? I said, oh, I'll come and see my player win the Brownlow. And he goes, who's that? And he goes, Matty Prittis. I said, Matty Prittis? He goes, Matty Prittis? Yeah. I said, okay, well, I think he's going to win the Brownlow. Anyway, spoke to Nizzy, spoke to Rice. They're going, oh, calm down, he's not going to, They don't know anything. So I thought they might have known, but they said they didn't know. Anyway, when his name got called out, I was just in tears, and I think I walked past Neil Cray and said something like, can't play. I can't remember. I walked past someone and said, can't play. I can't remember what it was. But I went over the table with Nizzy and Roscoe, and his name got cut out. It's like, just the greatest bloke in the world, deserves it. But funny talking about afterwards, his missus, she said that after he had that meeting with you, Cole, he came home and he actually went through the games.
Really?
Yeah, so he thought, fuck, I might be a chance here. So that was one of the greatest moments. Apart from your players winning premiership cups, that's what they all play for. That's what I want to be a part of. When Matty Spanger won his premiership with Hawthorn after 3 clubs, it was 53 games, and then seeing the picture with him and his family holding up the cup, you do get emotional because you've gone through 10 years of not getting paid enough and living in a crappy place in Sydney and going through some hard times with them. They're more so hard times than you, but then to see them win the cup, West Coast win a flag, Fremantle get close with Chris Conley prelim. We actually thought West Coast and Fremantle might make it that year. Yeah. So to have that would have been just unbelievable to see the 2 Western Australian teams. So it's that premiership, that moment there. But Pritter's one of my, the all-time favourites, and that's one of my greatest memories of all time.
Yeah.
Just going to adjust your mic a bit there, Cole.
No, it's all good. That premiership stuff, does it sit above a Brownlow? I know a Brownlow is a great individual accolade, but I think you'd speak to a lot of players that probably most that talk about that premiership.
Yeah.
Do you go to the grand final to see your boys play it?
Yeah. I've been to a few, and I've been to about 26. I've been spoiled, but the first one, obviously, Damien Martin and I went along, the cricketer, not the basketballer, and the guys won. And, we're up in arms, because West Coast, you're West Australian, and you've worked there, and the players, Quinny and Curry and Fletch and Stinger, and we had quite a few players out there playing. And I remember going in the rooms, and Jeppy let us in the inner sanctum, and Lynchy was on it straight away, and he sprayed me with champagne. And as soon as I walked in the door and I left Marto, then I remember walking around the corner, and I think Juddy, Cuz and Curry were all against the wall, and they were just exhausted. And I went up, gave Curry a kiss and a cuddle and high five on Juddy and Cuzzy, and just to remember looking at that moment, seeing them, Fletch and all the other boys and Stinger are all, partying on and getting stuck into it. And but I only stayed about 5 minutes and hugged everyone and got out. Yeah. And then the next one, of course, my son Barrett for Collingwood. And the guys,
really?
Yeah. And first time around, he cried his eyes out. Second time, and funny enough, that's the one that was West Coast. Anyway, wow. I'm sort of between a rock and a hard place because I love the boys and Garv and all yours and in there. Should I go in there? I want to go in there and give them all a hug and, and looking over at the sun, he's tear in the eye.
Was he wearing Collingwood gear?
Yeah. So the whole family's like, I was going for West Coast, but, Logs, I don't know, Paul Meadows has got something to do with that, and Quinny Lynch barracking for Collingwood.
True.
Yes. But yes, and I got to the door and I looked at him and I went, I'll grab him on the way back. Let them in, and they wouldn't have even known if I was in there or not. They would have been in euphoria.
It's a shit show in 18.
Yeah.
It's a shit show.
Yeah.
That's what my memories were. talking about specific players, just as you've been talking, like we've actually had quite a lot. We had Quinton Lynch on. We've had Nathan Broad as a player of yours. Yeah. Scotty Lysaght a couple of weeks ago. Who else? We've had. I'm sure we've had more. Matty Spanger.
Yeah. Spangs. Bellas.
Yeah. Chad Fletcher.
Fletchy.
Yeah. So a lot of your boys. Scott Lysaght specifically, we spoke about a story and he told. It was quite funny, his perspective of it, and I don't know if you remember specifically. I know you got a good memory. 2018, win the flag. We go to Hong Kong 10 days after, so it's been quite a big couple of weeks. And we're at a kangaroo court one of the days, about day 2 or 3, and the boys have been singing the Port Adelaide theme song to Scotty throughout the trip, right? And as Scotty goes, great nature, loved it. He was singing along with it. He made his decision to go, right? But day 3 came about, and I just remember Scotty in tears on the phone to you and telling you to ring Craig Vozzo on West Coast, saying, "I'm not going." Was that serious?
That's true. Yeah. That's one of the calls. Like when the boys are on, away on holidays, and back then it was a bit different because now it's born regulated when they go away and all that. And when you get a phone call from players when you know they're away, it's always, whether it's Vegas, whether they're somewhere, you go, okay, And then, Scotty, what's up? Ring Voz. I'm not going. I love the boys, Nate, basically the deal's done. They've already got someone coming in, I think. Your salary cap's gone out the door. I don't care. I'm not going. Get it done. I put the phone down. Okay. So I got to do my job. I got to ring Voz. I said, Voz, you're not going to believe this. He started laughing. I said, I've got to ring him back, but I'm not going to ring him back today because he's in good spirits with the boys. And it's not that he didn't want to go to Port. It's just that, when you're away and you're loved up with your mates. And
won a flag.
Yeah, you won a flag. You've gone to war with your mates. It's forever. Mm-hmm. So anyway, 48 hours, I'd sort of let it simmer and didn't want to ring Port because the deal was done. So
how could you even do that?
Hey?
What could you even say to them? Sorry.
No, well, if I have to do it, I have to do it. So... look, he's changed his mind, but it was basically done, and West Coast were down the track and it had gone. So, the salary cap had gone from memory. I think got someone, it could be Vardy, I don't know who they got. They had someone coming in. And but I do remember that moment because I was on the balcony where I lived down at Scarborough, and to get out, I don't let my family hear what I'm doing most times, so I've gone out in the balcony and had the conversation, and I've looked up. And so anyway,
that's awesome.
But yeah, that's a true story, Scotty, and we do actually. I only caught up with him a week ago, but we do talk about those moments at time because he does have
sliding doors, right?
Sliding doors, and he has a love, Jack and Yowie, yourself. He has some strong bonding. He's loved Port Adelaide, and the funny thing is, it's not probably funny, but you have players who've just won one, and as your belief, you've just won one, you're going to win another one. And so to have a player move after they've won one, Cal Sinclair's gone one. Yep. And I remember telling Cal that Sydney Swans, and he was, what? Didn't want to go.
That was 2015.
Yeah, Scotty Clayton, Scotty Lysaght, don't want to go. But it's very hard to back it up. And Port Adelaide have probably gone a little bit better than West Coast over the journey. And Sydney, unfortunately for Cal, didn't get there, but they've gone a bit better as well. Yeah. So it's always, I want to stick. Joel Hamling, when he... we had an agreement to go to Fremantle Sporters. We were going to Fremantle, Joel Hamling. I was probably the only bloke in Australia barracking for Sydney Swans. Yeah. Because I knew that if the Bulldogs won, Joel changed his mind. Yeah. And I'd agreed, and he'd agreed to go to Freo. So I'm sitting there going, and I didn't go to this one. I came home early, and I was sitting on the couch. I've had one drink, another drink. I go, oh no. And then the Bulldogs have won. I go, oh no. And anyway, 24 hours later, Joel rings me and goes, probably going to stay. So I go, okay, mate, let's give it a few days. I actually did ring Freo and said, look, he could stay. But at the end, after a week and a half, for family reasons, he wanted to come home, and it got done. But yeah, it's always a scary moment when you've got a player who's won one.
Do you have what about when they just have buyer's remorse a bit, and does that happen often? Players calling and go, I'd like to stay even if they haven't just won a premiership, or even if they've just gotten there. Do you have calls like, man, I've made a bad call?
No, I haven't at the moment. Not yet. Normally, when we're talking just hypothetically, we'll do it like Griffin Logue. So, okay, what are the 5 key areas? So first of all, got to be a type of coach that he liked, and he gave me the DNA of what type of coach. Okay, teammates. What's the culture at the clubs that we're talking about? what are their headquarters like, and there was 5 key areas. If you get those 5 key areas right, normally 9 times out of 10, the player's going to love the club.
We've all, well, I've seen it, but I'm not sure everyone else has. But Stan's documentary, Show Me the Money, you're involved in season 1. Season 1, there was a whole bunch of rumoured stuff to be getting done, and then it didn't really get done. Flip forward another year in season 2, and the last 10 minutes of the trade period, the footage I've seen anyway, had you running around like a marathon man, like Steve Monaghetti between rooms.
Yeah.
The trade deadline stories, I think some people think they're staged.
Yeah.
Are they real? Like that last minute running around trying to get deals done?
Well, I even during the journey when you're in the hub and you're there, you think, are these guys holding it up for the media or the AFL or whatever? You actually do think that. And last year, the show Stan, we never really had much to deal with because, from memory, Rory got, GWS asked Tuesday of the first week, so it was kind of a struggle, and you had a year to go and all that stuff 2 years ago. And Bobby Hill, obviously GWS as well, had a year to go, and they just lost a few players, so it was always going to be tough, but we had to still engage. If we didn't engage, we'd get sacked. Players asked us to engage in a trade, so we pushed every button. Unfortunately, the buttons didn't come off. Maybe if Bruce gone or someone gone, Bobby would have gone, and then it would have opened up money to back for Robbie. But in the end, Bobby's now at St Kilda, Collingwood, and he's extremely happy. And Roy's at the Bulldogs, and he's extremely. Fremantle are extremely happy. They've got Jackson, Jager, and Corbett, so it's worked out really well.
You were literally running though. What are you running to do? What are you doing?
Well, unfortunately, because of all the renovations at Marvel, it was differently structured. So you had Adelaide at one end and the Bulldogs and West Coast at the other, and you had 2 or 3 media stations in the middle, and so you had to, when it got tight, and if there was a phone not working or whatever, and the clubs weren't communicating, or some managers worked hard and some sat in their backside. So I had to run from Brisbane Lions to the Bulldogs quite a few times to pass on the information to make sure. I think at one stage, and I obviously haven't seen any of the footage yet, but I remember showing the phone, taking a picture of what Brisbane's offer was, which I thought was fine. So I ran down and I showed Sam, and I think the TV was on it, and then I ran down again and ran down again, and then I remember going back in the last 2 minutes. It was like that slow motion film, and Blair Hartley from the Richmond Tigers was leaving, and he put his hand up to high five me because I was that close to getting done, and then I walked in and bang, done, whoosh. So yeah, it was absolutely wasn't staged, because I have no intention of dragging any trade out. I'd like to get them all done first day.
Yeah.
But no, that was the real deal. And I'm looking forward to seeing that part of it, because you do lose a lot when you're in it.
Yes.
Because you're pushing so many buttons and going to so many angles to try and get it done. Meekie's manager didn't move, I think, 2 feet from the Hawthorn door. Mate, I rang back about 100 times. He was still there. I thought he was a statue. He wasn't going anywhere from that Hawthorn door. And to his credit, Meekie's at Hawthorn.
Yes.
So there was other managers in the hallway moving, and I said some weren't, some were. It was quite an intense last 5 minutes, and one that you probably want to go through all the time, that's for sure.
I want to ask some bigger picture questions, just some views, given that you're standing between it all. The bigger one from a players and managers' point of view that I'd love to hear your opinion on is I guess where does the responsibility lie for player welfare? Not performance, not contracts. I think they're pretty clear but player welfare, not only at the club but away from the footy club. There's a lot of parties at play. There's the AFL, there's clubs, there's player agents, there's the AFLPA, there's the players themselves.
Parents, girlfriends, wives.
Where do you think the responsibility lies to make sure that players are not necessarily happy but looked after, both at the club, away from the field, and then life after footy?
Ex-schoolmates as well. That one player, their best mate enters the AFL system and now has a regiment from day to day, hour to hour, and they don't. So there's a lot, and it has changed over the journey where, as I said to you before, all the key areas you just spoke about have all got better. And even entering into the system now, the clubs Q&A on their interviews with the players coming into the industry with psychs. So there's a lot of work done before you get picked up to find out whether you could be taken interstate, whether you wouldn't work if you did go, homesickness and all that. But you work as hard as you can with the player and the parents for as long as you can, trying to make sure that, everyone's on the same track, savings and cars and home loans and off-field, drinking and, partying and not doing that in the right time. And you're always trying to take them to the well. Sometimes 90% of your players will listen, and they will listen to the club, or they will listen to the AFL, the AFLPA, or whoever it might be, working with them, the PDMs at the club or the AFLPA delegates. There's a lot there to work with. Some are more experienced in some areas legally, and the Indigenous world we're working to a lot more now. So you try and use all those angles to help your player. But fortunate enough, as I said before, now that the players are coming in, they're probably more well educated. And, in 16 years, they're starting to think about being an AFL player professionally, with their diet, their training. They get mentors that have played in the system, all that. So it's a lot more easier now than it was back then when you were there. And there probably wasn't the support, everywhere that we just spoke about. And you just had to be lucky that you got a player that signed that was John Citizen and not, the person that's going to cause you a bit of grief over the journey.
The one thing that I don't think's changed is transitioning out of the game's hard, though, especially for guys that have been in there longer. Guys that are in there for 3 years, it probably could just jump back into regular life and pick something up. But guys that are in there from 8, 10, 12, 14 years, it's still a bloody hard transition out. How do you help, and do you think more can be done? Where it is?
Like at the moment, so you say if Bellas or Sandy or Fletch rang me, I'd pick up the phone if I wasn't in a meeting, and what can I do to help? But most of them are pretty well structured in what they're doing right now. Nathan Van Berlo, captain of the Crows, probably a pretty good example. Rocket scientist, probably 110 in his schooling and education, and even through his whole process when we go and meet with him in Adelaide, what do you want to do? Even though he might be in his third year, have you thought about, you're going to be a geoscientist, or all that? He's just a genius. It was embarrassing meeting with him. He just blew me away. We just talked about off-field stuff. But over that period, he might have owned a hotel, with Roo, and he might have done some, duplexes, and he's tried a lot of different things over that journey. And you're always meeting with your player. What are you doing? What's your thoughts? You're going to go and develop. I think if Jack decides to finish footy in 5 years, he'd be good at development footy. Jack Darling. So you sort of got that thought process. He might change his mind. But VB, even with as smart as he is, didn't quite know even when he was rushed to retire. And I said, you'd be pretty good in coaching. And he goes, no, I don't want to do that. And then 12 months later, I think his private school asked him to coach. And then so I think I rang Adelaide, he became a development coach, and then he's assistant at West Coast, and now he's senior midfield coach at the Crows. And he didn't know till after he had that break. Do
you think that's common with players, that they don't actually know because they're focusing on a career? That's what when I get asked about it, my explanation is it's an elite environment. You're the best in the country at something, right? And if you take football away from it and you turn it into journalism, or you turn it into medicine or legal or accounting or whatever it is, if you're the best in the country at it, it takes a lot of time to be good at it and to concentrate and to apply yourself. And so I put that to footy, that, so it's banged into us by everyone, all those things that I mentioned, that life after footy matters. But to actually make a go of your career, you need to put a lot of focus into that. Do you think that happens regularly? But that would be my opinion.
Look, I do stay in touch with some of the high-profile management companies in Melbourne, and they're right on top of that. And sometimes they said your players don't know. Like, well, if 10 years ago you told me you and I were sitting here today, I'd go, there's no way.
Yeah,
mate. And when you came into the office about 2 months ago to talk about the draft or trade, mate, I was really impressed with the conversation, and because you were actually like a journalist. Like
well, we did talk about journalists before. I'm like, I hope the Colin doesn't think.
No. I love what you did, because you actually asked a question. And back in the day, I used a word called askhole. ASKHOLE. It's a journalist who'll ring you up, you tell him the truth, and you just write bullshit the next day. So I go, you're not going to be another asshole.
I thought it was a new social media. Ask Cole.
No, I'm not doing social media, but so you've I think long career in what you're doing as well. But you could have been a player agent at some stage, and you could have been good at that as well because of what you've done. Come across in Melbourne, homesickness, if not, or have build up what you've done now. played on the halfback, dropped a few times, premiership, all these keys, all that. It's just a great experience for you to pass on the guys coming through. So that could have been an area too. But you sort of get an idea of what your players' DNA, you know, Hayden Ballantyne, horses, you know, Sandilands bought a company in, you know, commercial.
Mowing lawns, isn't he, Sandy? That's underselling what he's doing, but he's mowing lawns, right?
Yeah, he's got the commercial, you know, and the private, and so everyone's sort of, you try and find what they're sort of leaning to, and he's also doing a coaching. You know, look at Lecker. We got him on Channel 9, you know, to do the 2-minute cross about the fishing and all that, and now his always strength was the fishing, and, you know, off that. You sort of get an idea what they're at, and there you can pick up the phone to help them and ring up Channel 9 or ring up Channel 7 or go to SEN in Melbourne and meet with Hutchie, or, you know, if there's another. But at all stages, it can change within, you know, a week. Oh, I was going to do that, but now I'm going to do this.
Yes.
Everyone wanted to own a hotel 10 years ago. Everyone wanted to own a bar. You know, it sort of changes.
COVID put a pin in a few people. Hopes and dreams in front of that.
COVID put a pin in everyone. But yeah, so you are monitoring it all the time. But just they seem to be more educated now, and I hope that will continue on. So it's a lot easier for them. You know, it's the ones that get cut earlier. That's, you know, you expect them to keep on going, and out of the blue, the club's finished on the bottom, and they're looking at their list, and they cut a bloke probably 2 years before they should have. And the industry is so tough now and brutal with numbers that they don't get an opportunity to go to another club, you know, and finish their career the way they should have. And, you know, they've had to go and done something, you know, different than they thought they would have.
Yeah.
What about there are heaps of player managers in the AFL. Like, it sounds like it's a smaller group of people. But if you're seeing a player that's sort of not happy, and you're like, man, that their career's being butchered by the manager, do you ever give them a call and say, hey, you should consider?
No, well, even like if we go back to Will, because he was good friends with Matty Spanger, Will wasn't sure whether he was, you know, with the right company at the time. So Spangs told me. So I just said, well, if Will ever wants to consider, just let him know. I'd love to catch up with him. You know, there's players that have, and I can't be, you know, throwing stones at anyone, because obviously I've had a lot of players join me, and I've probably had a couple that have stayed in Melbourne and gone with another company, which I understand. But it's normally another player goes, oh, look, by the way, I'm just letting you know he's unhappy with his manager for these reasons. Do you want to have a chat to him? And I go, mate, I'd love to have a chat to him. Just let me know when it's the right time and place, and we'll have a chat. And whether it's the contract or whether it's the servicing, or whether, you know, you obviously will ask him the reasons why he wants to change management. And if it's legitimate, then you're all in. So, you know, it's hard to ring up, you know, another manager and go, oh, look, by the way, Jack Smith's coming on board. You know, I think we've had 2 in my journey that have gone across the other side, and I understood why the reasons they were going, so it was done professionally. So, but I can't go, you know, Sonny Walters, Brad Hill, Stephen Hill, you know, back in the day, Sandy and the Longmuirs and Medhurst, they're all with other companies. So sometimes we do it a bit differently, and they like the way we do it, and sometimes they might see another avenue over there that we aren't doing. So.
Given your wide sort of knowledge of the footy landscape, if we come centrally and current list to Western Australia here, how do you see the future prospects for West Coast and Freo at the moment? They're probably in different stages of lists, but what's your view on
the senior lists?
Yeah, and what it means for the clubs. Like, what do you think?
Well, when you're sort of looking at, look, I analyse the list. Like, after the draft's over, you analyse every club, what they traded in, and what they've drafted in. And then you do the age demographic, games played, positions. You can clearly work out that a club's coming to the end of their 5-year premiership, or they're going to rebuild like Geelong and Richmond and just keep tinkering at it and keep on winning them like Sydney. They're unbelievably good at what they do. So with West Coast, you know, I'd love to be, I don't think the list manager right now, because I think people doom and gloom. Mate, you got Elliot Yeo, star, Jeremy McGovern, star. Mate, all these stars in this team that play premierships, Gaffey, star. And they got a lot of shit thrown on them this year about them being overweight. And that. I watched them train during COVID, and they were banged up. That was the worst I've ever seen any club, and I'm not making excuses. And the worst I've ever seen in an AFL was the West Coast this year, with COVID and banged up players. And Yowie is a competitive beast. He's not going to go out there and not want to try or be fit. It's just a disgrace what some of the guys threw at him. But their list is generally pretty good. And then this is no disrespect to the players that I've got that have gone to another club or out another club. But if you look at the Western Australians that are around, you can build pretty quick. Let's just say Josh Kennedy goes out. You go after Darcy Cameron, and he provides that run and block for Oscar Allen and Jack Darling to come over the top. Do you get Griffin Logue from Freo? You know, you start looking at what players you can piece together. Nathan Wilson off the half-back flank, or Sam Powell-Pepper into the middle, because he's a bull and he's young and he sits. West Coast could rebuild pretty quickly. I'm not too sure what they're doing. It's none of my business. I know they're going to the draft this year with their first 4 picks, but I'm probably more excited about a list manager, what you can do with clubs. Wolsey, Belly, Justin, they've done a magnificent jump at Freo. They jumped really quick. No one thought they were going to make the 8. Their players have all jumped up. Their picks are really good. Chappie and Johnson coming through, Young, all good players. They've only got a tinker now, and then their list is pretty good.
The Luke Jackson.
Well, you know, one was a bit upset that Roy left, but Luke Jackson's got 10, 15 years in him. And he's the future of the club. That's a great get. So look, I don't know how they'll go next year immediately, but over the next 3 or 4 years, they're going to become a powerful club. So the list is pretty strong. You know, you don't know, you know, there might be 1 or 2 positions that open up during the year through injury, but Fremantle are well on the track. I think West Coast could rebuild really quick. I know they want to go to the draft, and media and members are saying go to the draft, but I've never seen a club go to the draft and win a premiership without adding on a few free agents or a few players coming in.
Yeah, it's always a mixed bag, right?
A mixed bag.
So the national draft is coming up. I'd say when this episode airs, it'll be coming up very, very shortly. West Coast, as you said, have got a strong hand. They got picks 8, 12, 20, 26. That's their first 4. Freo, with the Jackson acquisition, they've got 30 and 44. They're probably not going to be as strong in the draft. Draft day is a big day for agents. You'd have young kids.
Well, normally it's massive, and the last couple of years that's sort of left Andrews. That's his domain.
Yeah.
I've been working with I've had a lot of off-field items I've been dealing with.
Yes.
So Andrews picked up the ball there and run with it, and he's got probably 3 or 4 possibilities. But normally we'll go in 4 or 5 days before the draft and meet with the clubs. We've done a whole lot of work, especially Andrew all year, ringing the clubs, ringing about his players. And it's not, there's probably going to be 51, 55 picks. So if you put that into the equation, there's probably 3,000 or 4,000 going to nominate. There's a lot of players going to be unhappy. And we're here in Western Australia, maybe 6 to 10, you know, coming out of here. So there's going to be a lot of unhappy young men, but we try and find out where our players sit, whether it's a rookie, whether they're going to get drafted, whether it's next season or mid-season draft. But Andrew will be mainly doing that. I'm going to go to Melbourne on the 25th to have a chat more about the mature age. You know, Ben Edwards, the Bailey Rogers, Zach Langdon, Joel Weston. So I'm doing more mature age. Is there a chance what mature age will go? And if they are, it might be like Collingwood's list is outstanding. When you start analysing their list, do they need another young kid, or do they get a Bailey Rogers or a Ben Edwards off the rookie list? You know, Zach Langdon, you know, he'd be fantastic as a rookie for a club that needs to make the 8. You know, and they've lost maybe like hypothetically a Gold Coast who lost Rankin, and you get a bloke here that's played in finals. He's played in finals.
Yeah.
You know, he's been around GWS and a great club like West Coast, so he's a great. So that's sort of mainly the area I'm doing. And then after the draft, what a manager does is, like I said, Andrew and I'll sit down and analyse every club, look at our 20 players, and there'll be 15 that are happy and they've got, you know, want to be re-signed as quick as they can, and there might be that 3 or 4 that you think they might ask, so you start strategically planning for next year.
The West Australian element, and given West Coast's early draft picks, do you think we'll see some local picks to the West Australian sides? And do you think that's a smart move to draft locally?
If the player's the best player at that pick, definitely. I'm hearing that Ruben Gibney probably be the first player out from Western Australia, and there'll probably be 3 players from Western Australia. And this is just me hearing industry gossip or chatter. So Ruben, Ben Allen's son, and then the kid from East Perth. I've forgotten his name now. Gosh, I forgot his name, but anyway.
The Intercept Defender?
Yeah.
It's a great name.
Yeah, it is. That's why it's got me. So they're probably the first 3 that I think will come out from WA. But the talent in Victoria is unbelievable. I know we always say Victoria, and they get so much. I haven't got my stats here of the draft. They get 50% or 60%, whatever. But I remember walking into Sandringham's Oval 2 years ago, just before COVID, and there was Vic Country, Vic Metro, and I thought they were 19-year-olds. And I turned to some other manager and said, "Fuck, who are these guys?" And I was 16. Really? And I just wrote down 30 players straight away. And then, so I'm what I'm hearing this year 51, 55, and I'm hearing, and what we saw during trade period, everyone was getting picks for next year. Next year's apparently going to be the super draft.
Really?
Yep. You're going to be pretty simple. Marcus Ashcroft's son will go number 1. Brisbane Lions, they've got 2 father sons. When you analyse it, when you're talking to parents and they actually understand that they think, so like my son, there's 18 clubs that might look at your son. There's not. You know, someone's going to go for ruck, someone going to Gold Coast, Adelaide have 1 pick. I think it's 46. Is it the father son? Brisbane have 3 picks, 2 father sons. It's 1 pick. When you start analysing it, there's not a lot of picks. So where does Richmond have 2 picks?
So you think people are loading up for next year?
Next year is the super draft.
Jed Buslinger.
That's the one.
It's a great name.
Yeah, they're the 3 I think we have from WA.
Yes.
So you're saying you would take talent over
best available
local.
over local.
Yeah, best available over local.
If you've got you know, like I remember if you've got the club set up so well and you've got all the dots aligned, a player shouldn't really want to leave. If everything's put in place, family, everything's put in place, and these days you can go home on breaks and all that. And if they do, like Cornwall, so be it. You know, North will come out okay of this with their picks they've got, and Port, you know, they've done good. But I would if a WA player is there, I'd definitely take a WA player. If there's a player from Victoria or anywhere else who's better than that, I'm taking them straight away. Yep. I remember back in the days when Nick Nat went, Jack Watts, and no one knew Jack Watts. And I think he was a PSA, and Paul Connors, he's a gun, had both Nick Nat and Watts.
Did he?
He did. And I remember Chris Conley, because I managed Chris Conley, and he was at Melbourne at the time. He was talking about Jack Watts, and I said, mate, I've never heard of Jack Watts, and that's not being rude or anything. I just, because I'm from WA.
He played Brighton. He's Brighton.
Yeah, you'd probably know more about him. And then as the draft got come in, his name kept on popping up everywhere, and Paul Collins did a great job. Melbourne and Nick Nat didn't want to go across the border, want to stay home. But if I'm a recruiter in Melbourne, I'm taking the gamble. I'm taking Nick Nat, 100%. You know what? Fiji's a lot closer than Perth. I'm taking it. He'll be an icon in Victoria. He'll be big. I'm taking the gamble.
Yeah.
You know, I don't care what you say, Paul. Jack Watts, great, all that, but Nick Nat is the future.
Yes.
And I'd take the gamble. So in the end of the day, you put your balls on the line. If you're a list manager, mate, I'm going to give you a flag in 5 years. If I don't, you just sack me. You know, that's how I work it. You know, and if player wants to, if you come into my office and you go, hey, Cole, mate, I'm not really happy. I want to get traded. I'm going to go, okay, if I can't turn you around or help your situation, mate, okay, I've heard you. Let us know where you want to go. We'll try and facilitate it for the best for the club,
yes,
and we'll try and help you out.
Yes.
That's the way you should do it.
Now, Cole, you've been very generous with your time, mate. We are moving to the very back end of the podcast, and it's probably the most special. I'm sure you know all about it. This is social media.
Can I just ask one more question before social? I know it's time. So the trading, the one thing that irks me the most about the AFL trade system is players nominating clubs.
Yep.
So I can't think of many sports in the world where that gets to happen, where like I'm going to Port Adelaide, for instance, and then Port Adelaide, let's say a West Coast player wants to go to Port, they are absolutely handcuffed. They have to deal him to Port, and they can't get the best in return. Whereas like in the NBA, they want to get traded. All right, I'm going to get the best possible deal for you. I don't care where you're going. Like we'll try to help you if we can.
No, I hear you, and I read it, and I hear the members saying it as well. And it's a good question, because during this trade period, I think David Wall said on radio that, you know, if Rory wants to go to Melbourne, there's more than one club.
Yeah,
which 100% agree with that. But as an agent, I've actually went through the other 9 clubs and had conversations with clubs that only were looking for a forward ruck. So there isn't 9 other clubs.
Yeah.
There was probably 1. And that club wasn't in a position to trade for Rory Lobb. So at the end of the day, Rory made a preference of the Bulldogs, but if there was another club and he had to go, he might have looked at it. But he did have his heart set on the club with Luke. But I do understand what you're saying. But normally a good agent's done all that homework, and there's no, you know, if say for West Coast Fremantle, I think you will see in the show, if they go that far back at round 10 or 12, I said that Jackson's going to Freo. I think I said, mate, the industry knows.
Yes.
That he's going to Freo.
Yes.
There's 2 teams, but is going to Fremantle because they're closer to win a premiership probably in his eyes, and he might have more teammates down there. And West Coast probably aren't in that position right now with their salary cap, and they want to keep their 4 picks. So to me, it was a no-brainer it was going to Freo. And obviously, as I said, they are coming off. I think their cap restraints come off soon. But yeah, I understand what you're saying, and you can't pick and choose. But sometimes when you've done all the work, there's no other club.
Yeah, so sometimes when it says like player X has nominated this team, like you already know that's the only team available. So they're not necessarily just saying I'm only going to that team, but there's already works in behind the scenes that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, I remember, I think I either text Dave or I rang him and said, look, if there's another club that you know about, let us know. Because it gets down to the pointy end, although we were committed to going with the Bulldogs, but you've got to keep everything, at the end of the day, it got done. But I understand, but I knew, like it wasn't 2 clubs going for Rory Lobb. There wasn't a club that hit the media, which they normally do, I will take Rory Lobb. Not one club during the trade period came up and said, we want Rory Lobb besides the Bulldogs.
That's interesting.
See that? And normally, there is another club.
Yes.
The other club, if it doesn't get done, and sometimes they're stirring the pot.
Yes.
But you sort of read the media sometimes because they get it right sometimes, and during trade period, they get bloody good mail.
You fucking done?
Yeah.
Fucking cut social media off.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. Social media. Dan rudely fucking interrupting. We are here. It is time for it. This is where the people get to ask you the questions. You've heard enough from Dan and I, Cole.
Yep.
Been peppered with questions.
Yep.
These are from the people.
Yep.
Right? Social media for the people. Let's get into it. We'll have to do a bit of a rapid fire sort of answers here, Cole, because you've given us plenty. Yeah, correct. But that's all right. We can go however long we like, but I think some rapid fire stuff here. Shane Haddo.
Do you think that AFL players are compensated fairly when you compare it to American sports and their percentage split of revenues?
That's a deep question.
Simple, no. So, and I think there's a negotiation with the CBA now. I think it should be more.
Like what? It's probably around...
Oh, the gate, the media rights are going through the roof. Right. An AFL official told me about 6 months ago that the rights are going to be massive. So
the players should be compensated
I think
appropriately.
Because they are the product. There's no me. There's no anyone without the players. Mate, they should be put on a pedestal and looked after really well. So, and there's no players, there's no clubs, and that's vice versa, I guess. But I think there's an opportunity there to look after the players. And when they comes out with a salary cap, they go, oh, look, it's gone up 20%. Well, 38 players don't get 20%. No one at West Coast gets anything, but, they keep that cap themselves, which is good for them. But, you usually get the top 5 players get most of that money, and the bottom players get 0.
Yes.
So there's a lot of politics to be played out in that one.
A touch of _Frost.
Are there any trades or missed trades that you regret or keep you up at night?
Going into trade period, you don't sleep a lot because your sort of brain's ticking over like in a computer. What if they do this? What if they do that? And you sort of write it all down, and you think you're going into trade period knowing everything, being a know-it-all. This is what's going to happen then. This is what's going to happen then. A couple of nights before, you probably don't sleep as well as you normally do.
I think you'll want a bit of a writer reply on this, and there's a couple of questions around this, but this I think Geordie Barrett _
Why do you think you can hold Fremantle Football Club to ransom every year come trade time?
Oh, I know. I copped a bit of this shit during trade period.
Here it is.
It might look that way, and I'm sorry that it does look that way, but I remember talking, I wanted to want Fremantle to win a premiership. I really wanted Fremantle and Ballas and Sandys and all the players I've asked, Sonny Walters and every player, I really wanted them to win a premiership, and I still do, and I'm sure they will in the next 5 years. I don't wake up in the morning and go, hey, Rory Lobb, can I trade you? Griffin Logue, hey, mate, I've got nothing to do this year, can I trade you? Mate, I have a passion for Fremantle. It might look that way, but I get told what to do at the end of the day after lengthy discussions. I don't hold them over a barrel. I brought way more players in than a few have gone out, and the ones that have gone out are mainly, apart from Griff, for family reasons. It's absolutely falsity.
Boxall 450.
Does a private school education increase a person's chances of playing professional sport?
Now, before you answer, Adam Simpson gave an answer around this year, and with full context, I don't think he was saying if you don't get a private school education, we can't draft you, but he was speaking about the cut in footy cap and spend.
I think he regrets that.
Yeah.
I think the way it came out, because my son rang me up and goes, Dad, I'm at JTC. Should I go down to Scotch and get to...
I don't think that's how I meant it. But
I think in Melbourne, from what I'm hearing, the private schools over there are extremely, and Sky might more than me, that you hear that they're so professional about their footy and their coaching and their analysation of the games and all that. And I remember having a meeting with Scotch probably 5 years ago when Bailey Bamford was getting drafted or just got drafted, and they asked me what I thought they could do to get players drafted from, and I said start videotaping recording all the games as much as you could on all the angles. In the end, now it's getting done anyway, so we could get the vision out. But I don't think so. Will Powell didn't even make the state and got drafted, pick 9 in the Gold Coast. If you're a really good player, it doesn't matter where you are.
Eagle Nation, _.
How early are you? How early are you looking at potential draftees to represent them? Is it under 16s or earlier? And do parents or waffle clubs approach you, or scouts from various AFL clubs, etc.?
Sometimes parents from word of mouth or see me at the games. I'm very fortunate. I've had 3 boys that are now 18, 20 and 22. So I've gone through from, I was kick all the way through, and that's when I've seen a lot of talent watching my sons play. So I've kept an eye on players all the way through. Those 3 players are now, my sons are around Melbourne now playing footy. But I still go to a lot of games and watch, from 14s to 16s. There's rules and regulations when you can start talking to them. They do change from time to time, and when you can sign them. So I think you have to sign them, you have to be 18 in that draft year, et cetera, But I watch talent. I watch a lot of footy. I've watched every single AFL game for 20 years, just about. I watched Colts game. I watched a senior game. You just watch as much football as you can. And the trouble is, sometimes we're talking about Victoria, you don't know what's on the other side. That's why I've got to get over to Victoria more now. I'm going to watch 3 or 4 games this year early on to see what the Western Australians are up against come draft, trade. And when you're analysing sometimes the draft period, you use the combine and the state testings and where they're all at. This is a midfielder in Victoria. He runs a 2.6 beep, 20 metres, and he's running a 5.50 2K. We're running 6.20s over here. They're running sub 5.20s and a 5.40.
They run an 1,800 metre track, or what's going on?
Yeah, they're unbelievable. So it's just a wide range of vision. Sometimes parents will send me vision, or a club will go, "What do you think?" But it's rare.
Dejan Mystic.
Okay. What is the most ridiculous request or clause a player has insisted on in negotiations, and how did it go? And obviously you don't have to name names.
No. Well, that's a simple one, because there hasn't been any. I said the most, which I don't know what Schofield thinks about, when it's all done and settled, it's the jumper number. So look, I get 23 or pick 6 or pick 2 or
because in the actual contract it's pretty templated, right? I mean, there's not like every goal I kick I get a car, or there's. Would it be fair to say there's nothing? I think
there's something with back in the day. If I kick 50 goals, you might get a certain bonus, but then if he does kick 60 goals and people hear about it, he's a bit hungry and not fucking giving it to him, or
True.
So there's none that I know of that there's been that I've been asked that question. Basically, sometimes they get, "Hey, do you mind if you ring the club and get the jumper I was chasing?" So I get it.
Marty Mud, Crab 6, and this is a bit of a combination of everyone, because I think people who will listen to this might not have been able to make it at the elite level, but they look at agents and managers and being involved in the industry.
Yeah. What is an agency looking for when someone is trying to become a sports agent?
Probably the wrong person to ask. It's I know it sounds strange, but it's such an area. Like what I do every day, or Andrew does every day, we couldn't have anyone sitting there listening to what we do. It's so private and confidential, the family, all the things that go on with its finances. You really can't teach anyone how to become an agent. You can give them guidelines on what to do. Sometimes you might get an apprentice, and we might get someone on in the next 2 years to come under Andrew to start working. But I went through Clubland, and having worked in marketing and sales, and I did some financial advising when I was younger and all that sort of stuff, but it all worked out really well. But, working with a waffle club to start with and try and get into an AFL club, even if it's in marketing and doing it for free as a work experience, just getting in there. And because the difference is, if I'm going to see Scoey and try and sign him to Colin Young and Corporate Sports and Dukes, what is the benefit by going with us than going with Paul Connors or someone else? So we like to keep those things to ourselves, and sometimes we get players to sign and sometimes we don't. So it's hard. There's about I don't know how many agents there is. Every time we go to an AFLPA meeting, there's probably a couple hundred more. But it's how are they going to get a player? They get one, and he doesn't get paid management fees for a year. That's 4% of $100,000. He gets $4,000. He's going to live on that.
Yeah, because this would be the last question. How do managers get paid? People would wonder how do you guys earn a living? You get a percentage of player contract?
Yeah, it's up to us what we decide. I think some companies charge 5% and some might be 3.5%, but generally from
% of the deal?
Of the contract, 4%. And then the sponsorship side of it, some companies charge 15%, 20 and 25,
which are appearance or a sponsorship.
Yeah,
deal,
so it might be
massive
Puma,
deal.
might be 20 grand. We might go out and source Puma or Channel 7, or crypto or something like that, and so we'll take 20% of that. Which is a tax deduction to a certain percentage as well as the management fees.
And the young players, though, as you mentioned, you don't get a fee for the first 2 years.
Well,
it's
right? Up to you. Like I could say, Scully, if you think we're doing enough work, you don't mind if we charge you a fee in your first year, because sometimes we can negotiate a third and fourth year before you get drafted. So we're still working, even though. But for some unknown reason, the managers in Melbourne when I started all gave the first year free. So I just followed suit. But if I wanted to go tomorrow and hey, Scully, I said to you, hey, we start, you get first year, it's 4%, 4%, 4%. But it's normally they're the sort of the rates.
BackChat _, you know where to find us on socials, backchatpodcast.com.au. Thanks to our partners, our supporters. We're talking about sponsorships, Whippersnapper Whiskey, Margaret River Roasting Co., Bluebet, Shelter Brewing Co., Leaderville Cameras. Sign up to Patreon if you want one of those. Get our VIPs in there. Cole, thanks for your time today, mate. It's been unreal.
Yep.
You had fun?
I have. I actually read a few of those questions this morning. My son sent them through because I didn't know I was doing Q&A today. Just letting you know, someone said on the question, about haggers. Now, I haven't spoken to Kim Hagdorn for probably 4 years.
Yes.
Now, Kim is a great bloke. I don't have anything to do with him. We're probably fought more like than any other probably media guy to an agent. So, but someone keeps putting out there that I give Haggers stories. Haggers doesn't need Colin Young. He's as good as, I said, I blew with him more than but I don't think I've spoken to him for 3 or 4 years. So whoever put that in there, just get rid of that one because that's not true.
Thank you very much, Cole. Well, we actually, just for keeping it all nice and open and honest, we actually got hit up by the West Australian for a copyright infringement for that photo of you in the bath. What were you doing in that bath?
Did you really get? Did you? Was that not from the show?
I don't know. I thought it might have been from the show as well.
Yeah,
so
I think let's convert this into Patreon.
All right. See you later. Thanks for listening. Stay around to listen what happened with that photo in the bath.